Everyone, welcome back to Keto Crime and Thought Crime. Today we got part 3 of Rise of Zion. I won't take long to get there. I'll just suffice it to say welcome and a wonderful thank you to all my patrons and channel members. If you'd like to join them, down below. Also my merch shop up above. Like, comment, share, subscribe. If I haven't earned your subscription, I hope I do it today. And if you were subscribed, make sure you're still subscribed because shenanigans. And with that being said, let's dive into Rise of Zion. I'm going to finish this booger bear today. Let's get into it. We left off with Phyllis, young 20-year-old Phyllis, being adopted by the Dalton family, having kind of a thing with David North, Tad and Emma's oldest son, and then we pick up with her visiting David at the North home. And she asks if there was a way for him to help her get registered with classes, and he says, yeah, let's sit down and do it. So they open up the Zoom network, log into BYU Zion, and he asks for her ID number. The number that she was given when she was processed here at Zion. So it sounds a lot like Social Security number. And so they put in her number. It pulls up her picture. So evidently they're advanced enough to have an ID system. And he explains to her that none of her courses would ever transfer because only if you had been a student at one of the previous BYU's, Provo, Idaho, or Hawaii, would you ever be an upperclassman? She said she understood, so he helped her get registered for classes. Doug and Billy, we've cut to them. They are preparing to deliver the historical documents to the church leaders. Remember, they have copies of the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and the Bill of Rights. And he says, let's do that tomorrow. But now I want to visit my family. So he travels across the city to the Brown, Josh and Kim Browns, and opens the door. And the first thing Kim says, Doug, you look great. You've lost so much weight. Because weight loss is still a thing in the apocalypse. Evidently, Chad had a thing about weight loss because it's like the 3rd time it's been mentioned in this series. But anyway, so he asked to see Josh, and Kim said Josh is a little busy. He's helping organize stakes for the new arrivals on the outskirts of the city. He won't be back until late. But they do go ahead and call him, and he says he'll try to get home as early as he can. He gets there. They have a reunion. Then the next day, it cuts back to all of them delivering these historical documents to the prophet, who accepts them and says, even though the United States as we know it is gone, it is fully appropriate that we have a monument to the former United States, which led us to this moment in our temple. So we're going to do that. We're going to put a shrine to the former United States in the temple. And then, after they leave, Kim, Josh, Becky, Mark, Tad, Emma, they all decide, hey, let's have a night. Let's go out and have a night. Let's go to dinner. In this, like, apocalypse, I mean, maybe we fast forwarded another few years here, and now they're even more modern, but they're actually talking about going out and having a meal. And there's even a restaurant, y'all, in the city center of New Jerusalem, capital of the new kingdom of Zion. There's an exact replica of a Provo brick oven pizza restaurant. Remember the one they ate at in the very first one before Josh and Kim went to Guatemala? There's an exact replica, y'all. And they eat pizza and drink root beer. And they have a thought, and we actually find out more years have passed because they say it has been exactly 5 years since that very moment. So it's been about 3 years since the whole apocalypse thing. And they talk about the people in their church that didn't go with them to the camps and how most of them probably didn't survive. and how Zion is so much better than anything they could have ever imagined, and they're eagerly awaiting the next chapter, which, if you've actually read Revelation, the next chapter is Armageddon, the second coming of Christ, 1,000-year reign of Christ, final judgment, and then the destruction and rebirth of the earth. That's what's left to come. And they're very happy about that. It's just a little creepy. A little creepy. Doug says he feels that the Lord's just letting him recharge his batteries a little bit. He feels as a member of the 144,000 that he will be doing things until the second coming of Christ. And he says he feels this great draw to eventually go to Florida for some mission, but right now the Lord's letting him charge. So they decided, okay, well, we're going to try to do this more often and not wait another 5 years. And then a few weeks pass, and then all of a sudden, we're in Siberia, people. Actually in Siberia, Mathoni. And this brand new transcendental being called John, who we will find out is John the Revelator, the author of the book of Revelation, another transformed being. They're in Siberia, and we get introduced to the lost 10 tribes of Israel that are living in Siberia. These are European Mormons. Remember the ones that had fled to Siberia? Well, this is them, and they are all members of the lost tribe of Israel. And among them is a family that John and Joseph Smith appeared to way back in the 1800s. And then we cut to their son, Jeremiah Euclid-Neba, who is going to be the leader of these lost 10 tribes. And now we are introduced to a brand new mission for our team, bringing these lost 10 tribes of European Mormons to Zion from Siberia, led by transcendental beings. Chad was smoking some good shit when he wrote this. So, all of a sudden, John and Mathoni have now teleported after introducing us to Jeremiah and his family back to New Jerusalem, and they're meeting with some of the elders in the first presidency, and they all seem to think they know John from somebody, and then he kind of reveals his power, reveals who they are, and he congratulates them for bringing the plates from Hopi land and also bringing the gold to redo the temple. He says that all the prophecies that he wrote about are starting to come into fruition. He tells them about the lost 10 tribes in Siberia. They summon Josh, who he relays the story to. He tells the story about a meteor and Joseph Smith and how this is all shaping up to be about what he, John the Revelator, wrote about in Revelation, and how they now need to get these Siberian Muslims to Siberian Jew. Good Lord, Tracy. Siberian Mormons. It's all running together. Because there are mentions of Jews and Muslims later on. And so they need to get them from Siberia to New Jerusalem. And they said that the person chosen for this mission is Josh Brown, with the help of Miko Petrov. Remember him? The little Bulgarian Mormon Coalition double agent. Well, they've called him away from his duty of helping to induct new Mormons to helping Josh with bring the European Mormons back to Zion. So we talk about, we get shown their private plane that they're flying on. They land in Cardston, Canada, where they were refueled. They land again in Anchorage, Alaska, where they're refueled by a man wearing a t-shirt that read, "My body is a caffeine-free zone." Because Mormons, I guess, are anti-caffeine. Well, my body is not a caffeine-free zone. Coffee and zero sugar Monster. Not the best, but it keeps me going. Since this stuff tends to put me to sleep sometimes, I hope I make it more entertaining for you. Well, Then they finally make it to Siberia, and they meet all of these people that are living in this communal village. So they're already living by that all-important law of consecration. And they get to meet them, and they realize now they have to get them back. And so Jeremiah, who is their appointed leader, meets with Josh, meets with Miko, and they develop a plan. Their plan is to literally go hunting, kill as many caribou or as many, whatever large animal is out there, to stock up, and they're literally going to walk from Siberia to New Jerusalem, which is in the Kansas City, Missouri area. So think about it. They're going to walk across the Bering Strait into Alaska, across all of Alaska. Now, there are parts of Alaska, the top of the world, like Barrow, Alaska, that's right next to the Bering Strait, think 30 days a night. You can only reach that by airplane. Plot hole, Chad. You can't be walking down into Canada and then into the United States. It doesn't work. You can only reach some of those things by airplane. So evidently they have airplanes. They came here. Why don't you just send an airplane for these people? But anyway. So anyway, they're starting to prepare for the trip. Meanwhile, John takes Miko aside and prepares him for another mission. He wants him to walk from Siberia to Moscow in Russia and pretend to be an escaped, returned coalition soldier so that he can find out what the coalition's up to, because evidently Russia and China are still a thing. So, Miko starts walking from Siberia to Moscow. And I guess we're just supposed to accept that God, all these people have God's protection, and that's the reason they're able to perform these feats. But Chad, that's an assumption, and you know what happens when you assume? You make an ass out of you and me, and you very definitely made an ass out of yourself by writing this dribble. But anyway, so we're going to be doing some walking here, people. Meanwhile, Jeremiah is writing an email naming himself and saying that we are about to embark on this journey. John the Revelator appears, makes him delete it, says this is not going to be sent out on email. We're just going to do it. So, great. Then we have a conversation about how everybody was baptized into a priesthood, whether it be the Aaronic priesthood, which is evidently for younger people, and the ecclesiastic priesthood for older people. Everybody just put into a priesthood before they start going on this trip. They described an assembly line baptismal system where they baptized all of these Siberian European Mormons into the Mormon church, making it official before they take them to New Zion. And they begin their trek. And it takes them 2 weeks to get to the Bering Strait. And the Bering Strait is just a few miles between literally the Russian continent and, or not the Russian continent, but the European continent, Eurasia, and Alaska, North America. So they march, and all the time, Josh, even though he's got Mathoni there with him and John the Revelator, all the time wondering how he's going to get these people across the Bering Strait. And so, yeah. And when he gets there, Mathoni tells him that he's heard from God, and God is telling Mathoni to tell Josh that if he just lifts his arms up like Moses and commands the water to move, it will. So we get to see this epic scene like Charlton Heston in the Ten Commandments, where the water parts and an island, literally an island bridge, that's Chad's actual description, rises up, and they just walk across the Bering Strait into Alaska. Cut to Miko getting to, in that same 2 weeks, getting to Moscow. Another 2 weeks had passed. Miko arrives at the Kremlin. He walks in. He's lost 30 pounds on his trek. He has tattered clothes. He walks in. He convinces a guard he is literally an escaped coalition soldier from North America. And they let him in. He speaks to the coalition leaders, which are made up of officers of Russia, China, and now Iran, and a bunch of Middle Eastern states, Middle Eastern countries are in on this. And evidently their next evil plan is to attack Israel. They think, and they have, no one's even wondered what's happened to their coalition troops. They thought the virus got them. So when they see this guy, they're pretty intrigued, and they ask him to tell their story. And he tells them the story of how they were all ambushed in Denver, and how all of them were dead or ran. The coalition leaders are very mad, saying that their soldiers were foolish and they shouldn't have allowed that to happen. And then Miko says, I would not attack the Americans. They're still very powerful. And the coalition leaders say, well, we're not going to worry about the Americans right now. We are going to go after them, but we're not worrying about them right now. First, we need to get the devils in Jerusalem, Old Jerusalem. So now they're going to attack Israel. And with that, they throw Miko in a prison cell because they don't trust him. And he writes out a long letter describing their plan and prays. John the Revelator appears to him, takes it, and takes the message to the prophet. Then we cut back to New Jerusalem, where another 2 weeks has passed. And in that 4 weeks, the 2 weeks that it took for Miko, that same 2 weeks and another 2 weeks, it's been a month since the Siberian Mormons left. They get to the outskirts of New Jerusalem. David and Phyllis, who are a thing now, are saying their goodbyes because David has volunteered for a mission to go help assimilate the European Mormons. And so he's going to be gone for a few months doing that. Phyllis is doing another mission service also in New Jerusalem. And they are going about their whole time, their whole day, whole year, whatever it's going to take, to assimilate these people that have just walked from Siberia to Kansas City, Missouri. That was a quick trip. I'm not sure you could do it in a month, quite honestly. But anyway, plot hole. The same day that they arrived, they had just dedicated the new temple because it's ready, it's golden, it's beautiful. Mormon Tabernacle Choir performs because evidently that's still a thing. And the glow of the temple guides the Mormon Europeans there. Meanwhile, we cut to the prophet who has read Miko's letter and understands what the coalition is up to and realizes that we are getting very close to Armageddon and the second coming. But first they need to solidify their power for some reason back in Utah. And they say it's time, since Salt Lake City was a Mormon creation, it needs to be liberated. And they have a plan to liberate it from Shirem and his evil criminal horde. So they send Tad, Jonas, to go to Provo, first of all, where they have friendly people at the temple there. They travel there. While they're there, they meet Angie Thomason, who's an old friend of Tad's from before it all fell apart, and her son Tom, who was just a baby the last time Tad saw him, but the father, Kyle, had died of cancer. And Tad is kind of like amazed at the type of civilization they've been able to build in Provo, and Tom's been a huge part of that. And Tom loves animals, and Tom kind of has a menagerie. Among it, a 20-foot snake by the name of Sammy. And so God speaks to Tad and tells him through Jonas that Shirem is incredibly scared of snakes, and Sammy might be his undoing. So he says he will not free Salt Lake City with an army. It will be by wits. So Tom, Sammy the snake, Tad, and Jonas all go to Salt Lake City. They have a plan to infiltrate the Capitol building, and somehow use Sammy to get the upper hand on Shireen. Now, Jonas, who was once part of Shireen's force, says that no one really likes Shireen. They're just scared of him. So if they can get rid of him, the others will probably turn. So they make it into Salt Lake City. They make it to the capital. Jonas goes in under the guise that he escaped from the Manti Mormons. Remember when he was a plant, when the former boss of Ken, the former boss of Tad that tried to turn him in, was trying to go kill the Manti Mormons, and they suspected Jonas had been captured. Well, he's coming back under the guise that he escaped. And they welcome him back with open arms, no question. Shireen feeds him a tuna fish sandwich and a chicken noodle soup. Remember that whole thing? And puts him back to work as a guard. And he relieves a guard at the front gate. And he's actually able to let Tom and Tad in with Sammy the Snake. They slip up to Shireen's room. They put Sammy in his room, and Shireen sees the snake and goes like absolutely berserk, climbs on top of the dresser, on top of the windowsill. Sammy's coming at him. And so he tries to get away from Sammy, forgetting he's on the 3rd floor of the Capitol building, and falls to his death. So Sammy, Tad, and Tom, Jonas helps him get out. Jonas returns to his guard station. And then a little bit later on, they find Shireen's body on the concrete below the 3rd floor window where he jumped, and they suspect he committed suicide. And as a result, just like Jonas said, all of the men do run away because they fear that once the city people that they kind of have a protection racket going with find out that Shireen's dead, they will come get them. So all the Mormons that were left in Salt Lake City go with Tad and Jonas back to New Zion. Tom goes back to the Provo Temple. He says he can't leave the people there he's helped. He can't leave his family. His grandfather is too old to travel. He can't leave him. He can't leave his pets, but they will meet again. And so they go back to New Jerusalem. And that's where this book ends, with an epilogue talking about Armageddon and the second coming of Christ. And that's what we have to look forward to in the last 2 books in this series, which I will be doing in the upcoming weeks. And until then, hope you're enjoying it. I love you all. Keto Comics.